In the latest attempt to prove that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, pro-Palestinian protesters in New York, of course, went to protest in front of a synagogue, calling for the death to the IDF. Of course, every single absolute majority of Jewish people inside of Israel serve in the IDF, as well as many former people who came to America from Israel probably served in the IDF. So basically calling for hunting down any Jew you can see. And of course, the most important part, doing it in front of a synagogue. Um, Welcome to the reality show. This is the topic we'll cover today as one of the first examples of Mamdani Effect, the new mayor of New York, who hasn't even fully taken over. I think he officially takes over in January, but he's already been elected. And as a second topic, we'll cover a story from Germany, where I believe it was a Syrian refugee who has recently has been given a German citizenship, has actually had that citizenship revoked after praising Hamas. So we'll also cover that. Welcome to the reality show. Joining me today are Marco, Richard, and Nicolas Provenzo after some time. So thank you guys for joining me today. And I'm Nicholas, let me go to you. We'll have a few videos we'll play about the phrases specifically. But some people try to make the case that anti-Zionism or criticism of Israel, criticism of Netanyahu is not anti-Semitism. But almost every time I hear somebody saying that, they always do something that is pretty anti-Semitic. I mean, again, it's one thing to say you're against anti-Zionism, but you go protesting right to a mosque.
Before the show, I was trying to think of what would be respectable or principled opposition, and how would you seek to communicate it. And obviously, if you disagreed with something that Israel would do, you wouldn't say death to the IDF. You'd say, these are the things that I disagree with Israel on. And then you would seek someone to talk to about it, try and persuade, mind to mind. But when you protest, and you protest in front of a religious institution, or something that is not exactly the target of your wrath, or at least so you claim, there's a certain dishonesty going on. And what I always find shocking is the degree that this movement gets away with it. I mean, we're obviously on the show, we're going to criticize it, and we don't hold any punches there. But the fact that this movement enjoys mainstream support that I would argue is quite undeserved is the disturbing fact. And in trying to think it through, is it just low information people who are supporting this, or is there something larger, philosophic, and problematic in play? And I'd probably say both, because the I'm thinking of the Heritage Institute crisis, where you have the Heritage Institute president praising Tucker Carlson for giving a softball interview to a particularly repugnant anti-Semite. We've entered into interesting territory, and this movement will exploit every opportunity and every chance that it can get. And so, yeah, it protests in front of a synagogue. It gets its supporters white hot angry, and what good can come of it? I would argue absolutely none.
Yeah, just to throw something at a heritage story, that story specifically is the biggest reason why you shouldn't just call random people Nazis. Because when actual Nazis show up, I need something to call them and not look crazy. Because Nick Fuentes was the person on Tucker Carlson, and that is somebody who's like self-described fan of Hitler. So like
Right.
actual Nazi. And whenever I describe him as a Nazi, I have to do like a disclaimer, like this is not me trying to smear him. This
This is
is
not
like
mere hyperbole. It's
yes.
the real McCoy. Yeah, I mean, and the fact that, I mean, this clown had dinner with Trump, and Trump falls over himself not to criticize, and that so many people at Heritage. I mean, I know people who work at Heritage. I have an old boss who works at Heritage. There are good people at Heritage who I respect as economists, people who have championed objectivist speakers to come and argue in defense of Ayn Rand and objectivism at Heritage. So that this is going on, and going on for as long as it is and as deep as it is shocking, disturbing, troublesome. I mean, you can't throw enough descriptors at it for modifiers of bad.
Yeah,
And here we are. I mean, again,
well,
how would you
yeah, I'll go back to you, but let me go to Marco and Richard first for some opening thoughts. Although Razi in the chat says the good people have left heritage, and yeah, that is something that is good. The fact that many people have left Heritage Foundation, among them Adam Mosov, who has been on channel before, so that's great to see. I mean, Marco, when it comes to these protesters, I should add that the specific event they've chosen to protest was held by Nefesh B'Nefesh, which is an organization that is helping Jewish people to immigrate to Israel. One of the protest leader actually has said it is our duty to make them think twice before holding these events. We need to make them scared. We need to make them scared. We need to make them scared. They repeated it a couple of times. Now, when it comes to this organization, I don't know much about the organization itself, but of course, Israel has a lot of benefits for Israeli people or Jewish people to immigrate, and if people want to freely immigrate, I think that's a good thing. People helping facilitate that. I mean, people helping facilitate immigration. Like, I'm okay with that. Now there was a small counter protest. I'll just quickly add that. Where the counter protesters yelled at these protesters, "You are part of a death cult," and somebody shouted back at him, "Fucking Jewish pricks," and also calling them rapists, racists, and pedophiles. Is this anti-Zionism, Marco?
Well, I mean, it's anti-something, it's anti-reason, it's anti-civilization, to be honest. But that's the wider assessment of it. I mean, you mentioned it's a post-Mamdani issue. Well, unfortunately, it is not, because it's occurring all over the world. It's occurring here in London, it's occurring in mainland Europe, it's occurring everywhere. And unfortunately, it's a kind of anti-Semitism which has become mainstream. It's become acceptable again to be openly anti-Semite to this extent. And these people probably in their little unused mind, they're convinced that they're just exercising their freedom of speech. But they are not actually, because the fact that they are protesting outside a mosque, outside a synagogue in the first place, to them means absolutely nothing. They don't make connections. They don't realize what they're doing, because in their mind they're just attacking the organization, which is effectively facilitating Jewish people moving to Israel. But if you look at the placard, at the sign that they're carrying, you see that they're saying no to a two-state solution. They have an app that shows the whole state of Israel with the Hamas Palestinian flag all over it, which means they do not recognize Israel. I think a sign said, "We do not recognize the right of Israel to exist." So they're pretty explicit in their anti-Semitism. It's not just anti-Semitism; it's openly against the existence of the single democratic free country in the Middle East. So they made their case quite clear. The Musk, if they have a war, well, has slipped massively, because they are declaring exactly what they're for. They are against civilization, and they are certainly for Islamofascism, dictatorship, and all sorts of kind of stuff that they would complain about if they actually were enacted where they live.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's not just that they're against Jews and Americans moving to Israel, but Jews specifically. They're against Jews being in New York as well. I mean, it's the essence of what they're doing here is they're trying to intimidate them to be elsewhere, or preferably not to exist at all. And it's that intimidation, isn't it? It's the what did you say the phrase was? Make them scared. They obviously couldn't find a rhyme for that, so they went for repetition. But either way, rhyme or repetition, it's still intimidation. It's still not an argument. It's still trying to use emotion as a tool to force people into doing what you think they want to do, which is no way to behave. It's not using reason at all. It's simply a means of trying to use mob rule to force another group to comply with you. and that's not respecting the individual rights of those Jews to go about their business, where even if it is to pray in a synagogue, something we consider to be a futile exercise, but nevertheless they've got a right to go about their business. And Nicholas mentioned there the fact that it's why do they get away with it? Why do these people get away with it so much? And it is, I think, cowardice is a big part of it from many other groups, isn't it? But not criticizing this, being too afraid to say that this is not acceptable, and thus, it emboldens them. And the result of Mamdani, he may not be in place at the moment. That's a symptom of it, but that further emboldens them to go ahead and do this kind of picketing and intimidation in front of a synagogue such as this. But certainly, the argument that it's anti-Zionist as opposed to anti-Semitic is shot down by your location where you're doing it. You're not doing it outside an embassy for Israel or something like that, which would at least match with the idea that it's against a country's current policy, which you're expressing your views. And of course, as Nicholas mentioned, the place to make those arguments would be like in print or one-to-one in a civilized manner, not in an intimidating manner, where essentially you're saying, get out, and you shouldn't exist here, and you shouldn't exist there either.
We have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, deport the mayor to Uganda. Well, he is a naturalized American citizen. In some ways, he could have been the example of the American dream. I mean, again, somebody born in Uganda moves to America, becomes a naturalized citizen, and becomes a mayor of the biggest city in 7 years after becoming a naturalized citizen. That is pretty incredible. Unfortunately, his ideas are abhorrent, but in the fact itself, that well, America still is a place that allows for people from foreign countries to become successful. So it has that sort of essence in it. If only it was channeled much better. If only the better people came in, and better people are coming. But unfortunately, the ideas in politics, in the humanities, are really bad and encourage these kind of ideas. Let's watch one video, and then I'll have a few more things to add. So let's see. Okay, so we have this first clip where they are yelling death to the IDF. Now, this phrase we have seen more and more. I remember, I think it was an episode I did with Marco and Richard. Do you remember the musician in the UK who did that?
Yes, Bob Vylan.
How can you forget that?
Yes.
Bob Vylan, I think he was one of the people who used these phrases. It was live on BBC. BBC didn't shut it down. So
it was at Glastonbury, wasn't it? In front of an audience of tens of thousands in person, and of course broadcast live, and then for a good while left on the streaming
catch-up
service that would allow anyone to see it subsequently. And it was that got them into a lot of criticism.
Yeah, and they're trying to escape anti-Semitism, or even trying to escape sort of that somehow this is okay, like calling death to the soldiers is okay, and hiding behind the anti-Zionism. But something I've learned, and should be pretty obvious, is trying to understand the context of what is happening. Let's say somebody is I disagree with something with Marco when it comes to politics, and somebody, some Islamist starts and attacks him. And I join the Islamists because I also disagree with something that Marco says. It's like, no, I am supporting that Islamist. I'm not just contextually doing my own thing. I am joining when somebody is attacked unjustly. Recently we covered the Elon Musk Billie Eilish attack on Elon Musk because he's a billionaire. I disagree with stuff with Elon Musk. Me joining her would absolutely go against my own values and would absolutely be supporting her own thing, even though my criticism would have been different, because that's what I'm joining. And, Nicholas, when it comes to the criticism of Israel right now, the main criticism isn't you know, even let's say even the Netanyahu corruption cases, which those are problematic, but let's say if you wanna like steelman something, or Netanyahu, not waging the war properly, which is our criticism, like not going fast enough. No, the main criticism is Israel is committing a genocide. That is propaganda. That is not true. The opposite is the case. Israel is not going strong enough. So yeah, theoretically, in a vacuum, criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. But anybody who is, jumping on the bandwagon of criticizing Israel is supporting that, is specifically going with the propagandists. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. I think, it's shocking to see how flippant people are with how they approach ideas and how reckless they are and how they approach ideas. And what I mean by that is precisely the lines that you argue. I mean, let's say that I had a legitimate reason to disagree with how Israel prosecuted the war against Hamas. I think that you should have done this, or it should have been more restrained, or something. I mean, how would I make that argument without package dealing, all Jews must die? It would be, I would have to cite probably law cases and past incidents and how we look at the moral prosecution of a just war in order to evidence my case and argue from fact. No one benefits from faking reality, so you're trying to show the reality of the situation and lead people to the truth. The kind of chanting that you saw is like the exact opposite. It's like what primitives banging a gong and just through sheer repetition hoping to score points. And that's like, the exact opposite. It's the utter anti-mind position. And then again, death to the IDF? Really? I mean, okay, but who are you persuading? But what's so disturbing about it is it has more traction than it should. The fact that there were more than 3 people there is disturbing to me in front of the synagogue, marching and chanting. So, why? Why does that resonate? And I think it's just another emblem of how we live in this horrific tribal age where tribalism is tolerated intellectually. And by tolerate, I mean like, you're not walking down the street and like, you're idiots, go away. I mean, it just however it manifests itself, that, it just wouldn't be roundly condemned. And again, intellectually, by showing this is why it's wrong. This is what you really need to do. And this is how you would do it. And worse, I think what it does is it prolongs the conflict because the chanters aren't getting to the heart of their mistake. They're not seeing it. And again, that's deeply disturbing to me because it's just only going to perpetuate the misery, because this is a side that needs to lose its pretense, and it's not. It's if anything, digging in its heels. And I think it's a product of the fact that the IDF did not defeat Hamas like it needed to be defeated, and we're seeing the fruits of that. And I also think it's just the abdication of the West in staking a moral claim for its own existence and proudly saying, this is what we are, this is who we are, this is what we believe, and this is good. And we're going to stand up for it, and we're going to argue for it, and we're going to reveal you to be fools if you argue otherwise. And again, you just don't see that. You don't see the strength of the argument. This is a welcome bastion of rationality, but you just don't see it elsewhere. Again, Heritage. I know lots of people at Heritage, and yet they've fallen prey to this nonsense. I mean, what was the argument? We can't speak against a member of our tribe. Conservatives don't criticize conservatives. Of course they do. I mean, the conservatives had no problem damning Ayn Rand to the end of the earth when she published Atlas Shrugged, saying that, falsely, in my opinion, that she advocated death camps. So conservatives have been house cleaning for a long time, and not in a good way. But when you have someone who's a naked anti-Semite and you can't figure out that this is out of bounds, and you just don't sanction it by, the way that Tucker Carlson was, that's bad. And so I think, the rot is across the board, and it's scary because if the West can't articulate a reason for itself, and if it's not willing to defend itself intellectually, the marchers and chanters win by default, and that's just horrific to contemplate.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the phrases, and I mean, Marco, maybe it is just, coincidence that every single phrase calls for the destruction of the Israeli state. They come to a meeting, try to make up the phrases. Okay, let's think. Houthis, make us proud, turn another shit around. Oh, whoa, no, that's calling for terrorists to attack. Okay, let's think again. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Oh, calling for the destruction of Israel again. Death to the idea. Oh, wait, it's hard. When we come up with titles for our shows, it takes us a little bit. It's hard, but somehow with these people, it always comes back to the destruction of the Israeli state. Now, I understand that, adding a lot of context is hard to a phrase, but maybe if the only phrase you can come up with is something you disagree with, normally you would not do it. We wouldn't do a phrase on our show that sounds good, but we don't agree with it. So, and not to mention, these people are choosing, this is the most recent protest that just happened, and we see all the phrases we've heard before, we hear again, even the ones that were created this year, like the death to the IDF. I think this wasn't a commonplace, and it only became, I think, a thing after Bob Dylan, actually. Marco?
Well, yeah, the problem with these people, they are effectively, as Nicola pointed out, they haven't got an argument really. They don't really know why they're there somehow, but they're tribalists. They recognize the chants, they recognize the kind of clothing that the supporters of Hamas wear, and they just turn up like that because on an emotional level, they feel that Israel is on the wrong because they've seen the pictures, they felt sorry for the Palestinians, and they are used on this level, but they are useful idiots for the people actually are pushing the propaganda, Iran and their stooges. And we've seen this happen over and over again. They don't have an argument, they got chants. They replace argument with chants and rhyme. Sometimes they don't even rhyme. They're so ignorant and stupid they don't even realize that it's not a rhyme. But they try to suffocate any kind of debate because deep inside they know they haven't got a point. They know that they don't really stand up to scrutiny, whatever they say or whatever they're chanting. What's more important, I think, is that they don't realize what the outcome, what was the final arrival point of the stuff they are chanting and they're talking about will mean. Will mean effectively going back to the Middle Ages, Sharia law, women wearing scarves and not be seen, and all this kind of oppression of the individual. I mean, that's ultimately what they're aiming for, and they don't realize that. And Nicholas is right. We are not making a point. Our society is actually not turning around and saying, "Hang on a second, this is effectively going back a century on the level of civilization that we reached." And the fact that they are another culture, it doesn't mean that they are correct. It doesn't mean that we have to respect somebody who's backwards. But we don't make these arguments. Of course, we, the living, we understand that freedom is the condition necessary for a life to be lived properly and happily. These people do not accept it because deep inside, they accept socialism, accept all those ideas which effectively are enemies of humans. These people accept that humans should be treated like cattle and led by some strong leader or some strong authority that comes whether from the sky or from from the ground. They don't care. They're quite happy to be lamb to the slaughter. And that's the fundamental difference. Capitalism is the system that supports freedom and sees man as somebody whose life actually belongs to himself. These people don't think that. That's a fundamental problem.
And certainly you can see all the time they're thinking in terms of collectives, in terms of groups, and not in terms of ideas, aren't you? And whether that is the tribe, whether that is the mob, whether that is even the majority in terms of how people vote, they're all groups. They don't make an argument right just by being more numbers of people stating that falsehood. The argument is related to, what reality. You've got to be able to build it up from reality. You can't just invent it and repeat it by rote en masse in order to make it true. That is simply mass incantations, isn't it? To try and wish something into being the case that isn't. And I think, there's a lot of what you're seeing go on here. And of course, a lot of these people, there's a psychology to it as well as a philosophy to it. There's the fact that some people don't have, they don't believe in themselves, that they don't have a self outside of being part of a tribe, and can only see themselves in terms of tribe identity. So the psychology certainly feeds into it, and obviously one feeds the other and exacerbates the problem. But certainly when we're talking about, like the earlier, when I was mentioning the cowardice involved by those who don't criticize them, that comes from an egalitarianist perspective, doesn't it? It comes from an argument that any group, regardless of how ridiculous or primitive or stupid their ideas are, they're of equal weight to those ideas that are civilized, sensible, and related to reality. And somebody treating them as the same is simply, dropping the way in the standard by which you should judge anyone's ideas. But of course, we have certainly seen some very similar scenes to what you're talking about here, in many ways, here in London. I mean, not so many weeks ago, there was in Whitechapel in East London, the entire street was filled with thousands of Muslim men, and they were men, with masks, all wearing in black, all appearing en masse in the street, blocking the entire street, the pavement, to express their view that this area was their area. And that was simply to intimidate anybody else who chose to raise the alternative view or was planning to raise the alternative view, which is that, obviously London is open to anybody who chooses to, live their own life in a self-sustaining manner and not expect anybody else to be able to leech off of, which is what many wish to do. But I'm sure we're going to cover that when we get to the second story as well.
Yeah, and well, let's watch one more clip, and then I wanna say something more. Okay, I'm not sure if it's heard properly, but they were chanting, "We don't want no two states, we want all of it," which, by the way, doesn't rhyme, so maybe they just came up with it on the spot. But yeah, this is what they're yelling. "We don't want no two states, we want all of it." I assume they don't mean Israel should take over the whole area. They are calling for, and again, what in the same way as you cannot pick apart, you criticize Israel, but somehow you put aside that you do not say that they cause genocide, or you do not say that it's apartheid, or you do not say that you're not calling for the destruction of all of Israel. In a similar way, calling for a Palestinian state right now, you are calling for another Islamist dictatorship to be in the Middle East. That is if a Palestinian state is formed, that is what will be there, unless you are advocating for some type of dictatorship that, a Western style dictatorship, Western style meaning like with, you cannot really have like Western values and be a dictatorship, but sort of like kind of Western aligned, let's say, which of course these people are not. That's the countries they are criticizing. So no, they are calling for another Islamist regime to take over, which of course, what would it mean for, I mean, not only the Jewish people, the Arab Israelis as well, the Druze Israelis, or any other minority, including, of course, the individual in Israel. What would happen to them is, of course, either death or expulsion, or, who knows what. Look at October 7th about the way Hamas and Palestinians, civilians, deal when they get a chance to deal with Israelis. This is what they are calling for. And again, where they are doing that? They're doing that in front of synagogue, where an organization facilitating the moving of Jewish people into Israel, which again is the one nation. And we are talking one nation at war right now is the safest place for Jewish lives because of how much anti-Semitism, how much not just anti-Semitism, but anti-Jewish violence is everywhere in the West. Take the Amsterdam pogrom, the synagogue attack in the UK, the killing of Jewish people in Colorado, in Washington, D.C. It's everywhere, even in Western states. These people, this is not anti-Zionism. They want the destruction of the Israeli state, and they want the death of Jews. This is what this would mean. They know this would mean that some people, don't even hide behind anti-Semitism, and in the heat of the moment, say Jewish instead of just Zionist. But I mean, yeah, Nicholas. I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that on the second story, but what can we do? I mean, this is the values in universities and in general culture are really bad. I mean, the fact that you have you have like I guess hate crimes is what they call it when it's like anti-Semitism or racism or something. But not only that you have that, but it's being praised. The Washington, D.C. attack was praised. The Colorado attack was praised. Or even broadly, the attack on the United Health CEO was praised. The Aaron Bushnell, the guy who set himself on fire, is like a hero because he set himself on fire for Palestine.
Right.
What the hell? What can we do?
Well, I mean, the nature of our modern times is that every divergent voice does get its platform, and that's part of it. So I always try not to give the mere fact of an opponent, their existence, too much credence. I kind of look for more. But when you see, again, large demonstrations or widespread support, like the murder of the United Healthcare CEO, where there seemed to be, there's something to this. It's beyond just some idiot, venting on Twitter or something like that, that the murder was okay, that it's part of something larger. And it's not just, some content farmer trying to reap agitation in order to get viewer eyes. There's something substantive to it. Then I think if we're going to preserve our civilization, we have to identify and condemn it. There needs to be voices. So that's why I think this is, your show such a great thing, is that, you have people not giving moral sanction to evil and arguing against it every day. That's important. That's a place to start. I think any resistance is good resistance here. Just, enough to say, I'm not going along with this is a good place to start. I don't agree. Here are my reasons why I don't agree. I think that institutions that are dedicated to the free exchange of ideas have to defend that free exchange. So, for example, you're talking about problems in the campuses. There's a difference between holding an idea and suppressing someone else's ability to express an idea. So, I don't want the universities policing ideas as such, even ideas that I find repellent, because I don't know how you would do that effectively. But conduct that squelches someone else's ability to speak, conduct that threatens or seeks to intimidate other people as they go about their day, like we've seen on many American campuses, is disturbing. And I think the universities have to demand and enforce standards that protect speech, whatever its form, as long as it is peaceful and not, it doesn't lead to coercion. So, some students will need to be expelled after a hearing, after sufficient due process, whatever that institution decides, because these institutions are self-governing. But there has to be some sort of willingness to uphold the promise of the free exchange of ideas and some teeth to that, so that it's very clear that if you step outside these norms, you're not going to be welcome to talk there. And you don't want to lose that right, because that's valuable. I mean, as someone who's part of an intellectual minority, the ability to speak freely is inestimably valuable to me, because it's my oxygen for my values and my ideas. I need it in order to try and develop, a broader appreciation for truths that I hold dear. So, I would never want to conduct an activity or action that would threaten that ability to speak. Everyone needs to feel the same way. So I think there needs to be, again, a cultural understanding within the universities, but they're a little bit benighted there. Some schools are doing it, some schools are not. There's great institutions like FIRE, Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, that does tremendous work protecting freedom of speech from any number of threats. I would like to see more, and I would like to see a principled understanding of why these rights are important within the culture writ large, so that it's part of the discussion. I think what's happened, and this is my hypothesis, so I'll put a big asterisk on it, is that the West's respect for individual rights and freedom of thought and freedom of religion has led it to be unwilling to criticize bad ideas. So you have people who are actual proponents of wicked ideas, and then you have people who are kind of along for the ride. They don't necessarily embrace these ideas, but they're not reluctant to criticize them. Like, I'll give you a famous example. George Bush, after 9/11, saying, well, Islam's a religion of peace, because it was just too painful for him intellectually to say, there are some problems here, and these problems are leading to bloodshed. I have 3,000 corpses and 2 wrecked towers to show for it. We're going to have this conversation. But no, that was too much for him. Islam's a religion of peace. He had to go into that comfortable territory of not wanting to make the moral judgment when he's looking at something right in front of his nose. He can smell the ashes, and breathe the filth in the air. That's bad. That's a problem. And that we need to address. Why does the West lack that confidence? And is it a question of its tolerance squelches it? Or is it a question of something worse, like Marco and Richard were talking about, this egalitarianism, where you just can't criticize as such? Probably a little bit of both, but definitely something. And, there have been a lot of voices complaining about the problems of the West in defending itself, but I don't think they have had enough traction yet to hold the ground that they need to hold. That I find scary, because again, you got a great city like London. I mean, who doesn't love London for all that it has to offer? And then you have 1,000 men dressed up in ISIS attire saying, this is ours now, and you have to follow our rules, and to hell with you if you don't. That's scary. And that's not ground that I want to give up over my dead body. Resist the first encroachments. There you go.
We have a super chat from Christopher. Thank you so much. And Deborah, a member in the chat, is saying that we need to do a story on activists who have no clue what they are protesting for. And we sort of cover them, like here. We've covered Campus Intifada. But to a large extent, you cannot really talk to dishonest people. In a way, you cannot reason them out of their dishonesty. Somebody who is dishonest, who is evading, there's nothing you can say to him. So you can only sort of convince people who, like after October 7th, many people woke up to, whoa, what the hell is going on the left or the universities or with the universities, the students, or the leadership. Like many people woke up after October 7th because they encountered like what is actually happening. Or recently we mentioned the Heritage Foundation a couple of times. Many people on the right like woke up to like, oh, what is like happening with like crazy anti-Semitism like on our side? We always thought it's like there, and now it seems to be accepted here. So I think you just need to, whenever something like this happens, you need somebody to be able to say and explain, which is what we've been trying to do, about exactly why this happens. Again, people didn't change after October 7 on the pro-Palestinian side, on the left. People were always like that. They just had a new conduit to like put it through, and that is, among other things, much more apparent of the underlying ideas they hold.
I mean, showing that the showing individual dishonesty. It's like the whole joke with Bill Clinton during the impeachment thing. Like, yeah, he lies, and why aren't people upset about his? I mean, revealing that Bill Clinton was a liar was no news. I mean, everybody knew that he was a liar. The real question was why do people tolerate it? That people who executed and support October 7th are vile really isn't news. It's why do they why does a large part of the culture tolerate it? And then it's, you know, you look at it, it's they've built an entire intellectual superstructure of, oh, they're just protesting colonialism and they have to do it by rape because they're disadvantaged and that's all they know, and we don't want that, you know, or we don't want the Israeli. I mean, you know, they have an entire edifice of rationalizations for what in reality is just the most naked kind of irrational tribal hatred that you could possibly see. I don't know how you expose that by pointing to it. I mean, the bodies of October 7th should speak loudly enough in their, you know, final repose. I think it really is, why are you sitting on the fence on the sidelines tolerating it? You're the real problem. You're the sanction. I mean, that's the whole thing about Atlas Shrugged, the sanction of the victim. You are ultimately the victim because this is an anti-civilizational movement. And if you pride yourself on being any part of civilization, you're the one threatened here. Why are you tolerating it? Maybe that's the angle.
Marco?
Well, yeah, I mean, and then Nicholas pointed to the fact, why did Bush say that thing about Islam? Why did Theresa May, just in 2017 here in Britain, repeated the same phrase, Islam is a religion of peace? And, you know, everyone who's familiar with Islam will laugh at a state like that. But the problem is that these people are very religious people. And by criticizing Islam, they open a can of worms they're not willing to open. They're not willing to admit that actually religion doesn't lead to a fulfilling, happy life. Religion is just a belief. You're based on a belief or something that somebody tell you, you take as a truth, as real. So they don't want to start this conversation because that goes way beyond the pay grade. They don't feel like they can actually start a significant conversation with the electorate. They don't want to open the floor to the scandal doubts because they're religious people. So by default, they have to believe it. And going back to the argument of this, the organizer of this protest. I mean, she said it's our duty to make them think twice. So first of all, having a duty from whom? Who imposes a duty on you? And second, when she says, I want them to think twice, she doesn't mean I want them to reconsider what they're doing. Because if they reconsider the fact and they decided, no, we're happy with it, she wouldn't accept it. When they say think twice, means give up. We don't want them to do the thing we don't want them to do, effectively. We want to censor them, we want to stop them, we want to impose our will. And that's going back to what Nicola was saying. They want to stop a conversation. They want to stop the debate. They want to stop airing their stupid racist ideas because they know that they can't stand up. They know that they represent exactly the stuff that they claim to be for. They claim to be for human life. They claim to be for solidarity. They claim to be for the Palestinians. Well, actually, if you analyze what they're doing and how they do it, they betray the fact that they are exactly the opposite. They don't give a crap about the Palestinians because if they did, then they would try and stop Hamas from using the Palestinians as human shields. They would care about how life is destroyed all over the Middle East, how women are treated like second-class citizens or slaves, how Islam itself was massively involved in slavery. And is anybody ever going to Iran, to the Islamic Republic and say, okay, we want compensation for Islam's role in the slave trade? No, you don't hear the stuff. People do not complain about Putin, do not complain about China. But they seem to focus on the soft targets, on the people who feel guilty for existing, like the state of Israel, the state, the only civilized state who for some, well, we know the reason, for altruistic reason, they feel they have to justify their existence all the time. That's why we have to stand up to these savages and start saying, hang on a second, you are on the wrong side. If you have an argument, okay, make it, because we know, hand down, we can just wipe you out intellectually and show you where you're wrong all the way through.
And they're behaving like savages in the clips we just saw, aren't they? They're trying to use noise as force in order to drown out people going about their business and a view they disagree with, literally as force. I mean, earlier, Daniel, you mentioned how the Manchester synagogue attack here in the UK, in the court, as another example of that. I'm ashamed to admit that I tend to forget about that, not least because I was out of the country for a few days. By the time I was back, it was not mentioned. And that complicity of the media in suppressing, the facts of reality, the facts that these events have turned violent and led to the deaths of people, and of course, these events we're seeing in New York could very well end up going the same way again at some point. So it's clearly there, but it's also hidden, and it's hidden for a reason, willfully. Even the coverage of 9/11, I'm always struck by the fact that 9/11 is always solely thought of in terms of the two towers and not in terms of the attack on the Pentagon, for example, as well. And if you think, if attacking the Pentagon is not an act of war, then I do not know what is. So to then claim it's a peaceful religion, or that there's peace behind it, or that you don't have the right to then respond to that act of war is ludicrous and deliberately evasive and deliberate rationalization. And the rationalizations that go on are huge, aren't they? The fact that people chant "death to Israel," "death to America," and that isn't sufficient to understand what their motives are, what their attitude is, what their stance is, but you evade it, you excuse it, you rationalize it away, or even this death to the IDF. You say, oh, well, that's just the soldiers. Again, you're trying to rationalize it away, because when it's actually death to America or death to Israel, you're taking the same argument.
Yeah, why do
Of
they
course,
refuse not taking people at their word? They're telling you straight up. Like, I think you're dead on. There's always this, what do they want? They'll tell you what they want, and they'll do it in a chat. And who are you kidding to deny it? And again, it's the who benefits from denying reality? Nobody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the people on
Only
the
those
evil
that
side
want.
do.
Sorry.
People on the evil side do benefit from
Yeah,
denying
those
reality.
those that
Exactly.
want force to be the MO
Standard. Yeah.
and the standard. Yeah.
Well, let's move to the second topic, which is starting from Germany. I think I earlier might have mentioned that this was a Syrian refugee. I think it was somebody who came to Germany as a child, but I don't see in the articles that he was a refugee. But he recently has gotten German citizenship, which was revoked a few days after because of his praising of Hamas, where he posted on his Instagram a picture of two Hamas fighters saying "Heroes of Palestine." Now, just before we go specifically into the citizenship part, I just want to do a quick round of something we've already mentioned. I mean, Mamdani, the sort of the American dream, and even with this person. I mean, I'm just trying to think. Like, imagine if you are born in Syria, you manage. I mean, it looks like here, thanks to his parents, he manages to go into Germany, one of the most advanced European countries. Later in your life, you actually manage to get a citizenship. And what do you choose to do in one of the freest countries in the world, in one of the most not as prosperous as it should be, but prosperous economies, is praise some terrorists, some savages in Middle East because that's what somehow that has a connection to where you were actually born, or we don't fully know the motivation of this person, but I mean, Nicholas, I mean, we mostly talk about it, so maybe just quick thoughts. What comes through somebody's mind? People have free will. What makes somebody like go this route? Like, you get out of Syria, you come to Germany, you get a citizenship, and you praise Hamas.
Yeah, why do you bring the terror that you ostensibly escaped to your new home? That's a question that's tough, because I wonder to the degree that actually happens. Like, if you had 100 Syrian refugees, how many of them would actually espouse that? How open are they to new ideas? and how effectively is the new home communicating these ideas to the immigrants?
Well, let me tell you, Germany, not well.
Right. My son was interested in the family history, and I've never I couldn't give two licks about what my ancestors did. I mean, thank you for all you did to get me where I am, but that's my son was interested, so I started looking it up, and I found the side of my dad's family that immigrated from Italy, and they were all members of the Italian American Association of this, that, and the other thing. And it was interesting to see how they left, how they preserved the ancestral ties, and yet they became American. Same thing with my family's Polish side. There was my grandfather's brother, who was a B-17 pilot during the later end of World War II. And they did this huge profile in a Polish language paper about how proud the community was because he was a good Polish boy and a good American boy. And it was kind of funny to see the author really struggling. Again, this was written in Polish, so I had to have it translated through AI. The author was really falling over himself to communicate good Polish boy, good American boy. And this was a gentleman who flew something like 12 missions against Nazi Germany. And it's still a difficult time to be flying those missions. Why wouldn't our Syrian gentleman feel the same way when he immigrates to the West? I really have to ascribe it to the West's moral bankruptcy, because again, if the West was proud and effusive about its virtues and willing to defend them, he would have to sit there and have the long think. Is what I stand for good for me where I am now? And it would be no, because he's acting against the very virtues that make the society he's emigrated to function. But it seems like we've abdicated on that responsibility. And I do think it's a responsibility, a selfish responsibility, not a duty, but a selfish responsibility to stand up for one's values and make one's ground clear in this regard. Because if you don't, then you invite any number of problems through your abdication. Now, there should be professionals who do this. I'm not saying you do it for free. I mean, that's where the universities come in, where you would have people who study civilization and its requirements, and why something like individual rights is essential, the oxygen for civilization, why respect for the mind is the ultimate resource, is the oxygen for civilization. And proudly proclaim it from the mountaintops. But again, the timid West doesn't. And then you have all these rationalizations for the tribalism that we see and the unwillingness to walk away from it. It's fascinating to me how we live in such an amazing technological age, and yet we have this moral backwardness when it comes to articulating a defense against tribalism or mysticism, and it's just jarring to me that we are where we are. Like in the United States, there's this religious. They keep on talking about this religious revival and this Christian nationalism, this Christian conservatism taking a hold in the American culture, and just how disturbing that is. The country built on the Enlightenment, the country that Ayn Rand identified all these virtues that led to her greatness, abandoning those very things in the favor of what? Repackaged Platonic mysticism. It's horrific. And yet, to criticize someone in the basis of religion in America, even a benign basis, like they're not particularly outspoken about their religion, just like, you really believe that? That's nuts. I mean, like, how could he came down from a cross and then 3 days later, you don't have those discussions. You don't have those debates. So right then there, you're ceding a huge ground, rationality ceding ground to mysticism. It's horrific. So, but there's also the legal question. Like, how would you
I want to go
screen-
into legal.
Okay,
a little bit.
okay.
Marco, because I'm just thinking, like, if we take Germany or the UK, the idea of immigrants coming in there is not like a new thing. It's not like this started in the last decade. If we go to some of the other UK communities, a lot of came from like even like hundreds of years ago or 100 years ago, where different, immigrants started coming over, but it only seems to be sort of a problem. Or, Nicholas mentioned the immigrants to America. There's also big Slovak minority in America, specifically in Pennsylvania. So you had many Europeans or people from around the world going into America, assimilating, and now it seems to be that, yeah, something is broken. There just isn't seem to be happening.
Well, what is broken is the fact that we accept people who are openly hostile to our culture, our way of civilization. Now, there's a big difference between mass immigration in the United States and mass immigration in Europe. In the United States, you generally have a big number of South Americans, which culturally are not too different from the United States. Here in Europe, we have millions of people coming from Africa or the Middle East, people who subscribe to Islamism, effectively, not just Islam, but Islamism as idea, as the supremacy of Islam as the main religion, as the main culture. And they come here, and because the European Union is fundamental philosophically Marxist, they do not question their culture, the culture of the immigrants. So we never had the idea of a melting pot. There's always been this false idea of multiculturalism, which was supposed to accept every culture just because every culture is intrinsically good or right. And this was the fatal little mistake that Europe made. The United States used to be a destination for people who believed in freedom, people who believed in self-determination, or people who believed that they could make a better life. From where I come from, lots of people emigrated to the United States. They used to come back and spend lots of money and effectively show how much better life was in the United States. The United States was the destination. If you believe in making a life for yourself, you go to the United States, and the dream becomes true. That's the ultimate point. Here now we have a mess. But the specific case of this guy, well, first of all, it's the government agrees, or somebody agrees on the intention of withdrawing the citizenship to this guy. So it's not even happened yet. Second, you have also a government, a conservative government in Germany, who's trying to look like it's strong-handed with immigration, because, of course, the ADF, Alternative for Deutschland, is biting at their heels. It's becoming too popular in Europe. The alternative to this kind of policy, which has gone on for 10 years, is become totally unpopular. So that every government is trying to look like they're listening to the people. So it's a bit of a messy situation, this one. And as Nicholas pointed out, there's also some legal ramification for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just quickly, I'll throw to you, Richard, because Marco mentioned immigration for Africa, but even then, I'm trying to think of like big immigrant groups in the UK, specifically like the Nigerian community that I'm thinking of. At least as far as I'm aware, I don't really see the same amount of sort of coverage or problems happening in the UK with the Nigerian community than, let's say, oh wait, those are Christian.
Because most of those people were part of the British Empire. They were effectively homegrown. They weren't too different from apart from the color of the skin, which is irrelevant. They weren't too different culturally from Britain anyway.
Yeah, and they are Christian, I just realized.
And ultimately, it's about values aligning, isn't it? I mean, that's hence the story that Nicholas was talking about with the Polish guy and the US guy. The values were aligning in how he was, fighting the Nazis. He was choosing to fight them based on the same values that applied, whether you focused on the Polish side of him or the US side, the American side. So yeah, ultimately that is the answer to it, isn't it? And yet here you have a case of somebody who clearly was faking the values in order to get the paperwork to claim that they could then do whatever they wanted, and that behavior was not going to be punished. And I think this is part of the problem here in wider issues, particularly when the crimes are much more, when they're actual crimes we're talking about in terms of murders and rapes and stuff. Is there's still an attitude within Europe, certainly, that once you've got the paperwork that says you're now a citizen of a certain country, that is some kind of protection against your behavior thereafter. When your behavior thereafter is we're all subject to the same laws within the nation, and you should all follow those laws. But it's the suppression of some of that coverage that goes back for many years. I mean, even people have been pointing it out for ages. Right back to like 2015, for example, in Cologne, all of the attitudes towards women that were taking place by Muslims at the time in certain festivals and things, and all of that suppressed, and of course it tends to build. But obviously, it's a responsibility of each individual, their own behaviour, and here you're talking about somebody who is claiming to support Palestine in a way which is supporting terrorism, quite clearly with the association of that picture to it. And therefore, how is he going to be any different when it comes to supporting somebody ramming a car into into some people attending a festival or a Christmas market or the like?
We have a super chat from Christopher, thank you so much, and a super chat from Amy, thank you so much. She says they are counting on the altruistic con of the alleged genocide and malnutrition in Gaza, etc. It's the lie that they are victims, and hello to Nick. And so that was on the earlier topic, and I mean, absolutely, it's whenever, like, just take the genocide accusation, right? It was whatever the ICJ says. And then when a bunch of genocide scholars from an organization nobody ever heard of said Israel is committing a genocide, no. What matters is what this organization says. And then when somebody else in the UN said Israel is committing genocide, no, it's actually what this person says that matters. But going back into this German citizenship case, Nicholas, I mean, on some level, so basically, when it comes to the German citizenship, yeah, the idea for revoking was disalignment with German values. Basically, that this person doesn't hold German values, and that is a case for taking away the citizenship. Now, when it comes to sort of acquiring citizenship, I think, yeah, that should be much tougher. That there should be something different. I think immigration should be relatively easy and citizenship should be relatively hard. But also what you get from citizenship, not get from citizenship, but sort of the sort of things you are allowed with citizenship should be sort of a bit different, because unfortunately, I mean, being a German citizen is pretty dope. Having a German passport, that's one of the strongest passports you can get. So there is that. But I mean, yeah, what do you make of the specifically revoking it?
Well, there's always the question of how and why. What are the grounds? You don't want the government entering the realm of ideas, even repellent ideas, in my view. But you do want the government to be very concerned about action. So, what I was going to give the example of is you look at the United States green card application. It's called the I-485 form. And the I-485 is a whole bunch of security related questions. So, have you engaged in any activity that violates law relating to espionage? Have you engaged in any other lawful activity? Have you received weapons training, paramilitary training? Have you committed kidnapping, assassination? I would want to find a way to catch people who provide support to repellent ideological movements. So the question is how do you do that for a group like Hamas? Like, have you, the naked question would be, have you danced in the middle of the street when Hamas committed an atrocity? What would be the more elevated, thoughtful way to capture that kind of support? And what is that support? Is it material support? Is it, like, again, moral sanction? Now you're entering idea zone, and ideas, even if repellent, don't hurt anybody as such. They're just ideas. So, again, okay, the example would be on campus. have you prevented someone from attending class? You know, that would be like the kind of test to capture action that is impermissible in that context. For admission as a non-resident immigrant, I mean a non-naturalized immigrant, or naturalization, you want to capture action that is problematic or threatening. And I think there is a way to do it. I haven't completely figured it out, but again, it's identifying the particular acts that put you in the red zone fairly and squarely. And then, of course, you know, people will lie, and then it's like in this gentleman's case, he does something outrageous, and then you go through the paperwork again. Now he's getting a stricter level of scrutiny. You find out he committed fraud, you expel him. I think that would be the way that it works. But if it entered into ideasm, you're always at the risk that a bad political actor will just manufacture that power into something toxic and coercive. So, I mean, there's a reason why we protect even the expression of repellent ideas, is because we recognize once you create the mechanics for policing ideas, those mechanics can be used and abused, and you don't want that. So you have to resist every encroachment, even at the cost of protecting ideas that you find repellent, evil, wicked, and wrong. So I don't support freedom of speech because I love to hear my enemies call for my death. It's because it's the oxygen that I need to breathe. But at the same time, explicit actions that actively impact the rights of other people are fair grounds for the kind of scrutiny you need when choosing to admit someone into your jurisdiction. And with that,
now,
unfortunately, gentlemen, I might have to bail. So
sure. All right, thank you, Nicholas, for joining us. And yeah, we'll if you have to leave, you can. Where can people find you? Maybe before.
Oh, I'm on Substack, and I always love coming here. So thanks again for having me, and Marco, Richard, pleasure to meet you guys. So have a good one, gentlemen.
Thank you for joining us, Nicholas. With going to you, Marco. So this specifically came from. Again, the reasoning for denying or sort of revoking the citizenship is, or I think, as far as I understand, would be basically fraud. When becoming a citizenship or the citizen, the naturalization applicants must declare, since 2024, must declare their commitment to the free democratic basic order and to Germany's special historical responsibility, in particular for the protection of Jewish life. Now, this specific sanction is kind of weird. I think, Germany, the state, was behind Holocaust. Of course, a lot of people people's families, people are still alive whose families were killed during Holocaust. There are still Holocaust survivors living. Not to mention people who fought for Nazi Germany are still alive. So this is still a recent memory. But to some extent, like having that on like a citizenship application seems like rather than just a general, I'll protect individual rights, or I declare fighting for German values, or something more general that includes the Jewish lives, I think would be better. But yeah, Marco, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, this clause makes me really, really uncomfortable. So it's got the stench of the original sin, isn't it? Just because you're German, you must have been somehow connected to the Holocaust. Well, people who committed the Holocaust are criminal. You can point out who did it, and their sons, their grandchildren, especially if they weren't even born, certainly are not guilty, are they? So that this is a bit of a kind of German quirk that sounds a bit weird. But also, if the guy has committed a crime, then you can pick him up because he's committed a crime. But to argue that he should stand up to German value, surely freedom of speech is a German value, isn't it? Or are they admitting that you cannot have freedom of speech in Germany? So if he just says something which is repellent, but he hasn't broken the law, he hasn't committed a violent crime, well, that doesn't stand, does it? And personally, I don't think citizenship is a human right. I mean, in a free society, in a society that guarantees individual rights, citizenship, it doesn't matter whether you have it or not because your rights are protected anyway. So I don't really see this as an issue. But as I mentioned earlier on, I think it's just caught up in a political football game, effectively, where the government in Germany is trying to show itself strong on these kind of issues because they cannot make a decent argument in favor of their behavior with immigration generally.
I think that that line that you point out in what what the Germans want regarding the new law from 2024, I think that's just a euphemism that for you can't advocate Islamism here, but they don't have the balls to say so. And therefore they write it in such caveated language that also ties it into Holocaust guilt side of things, which is as opposed to just being clear about not being, you can't advocate Islamism in Germany and you can't advocate anything anti-Jewish is part of that, quite honestly. And I think part of the problem is the fact is what Nicholas mentioned earlier, which is the West not standing up for its own values and not making its own values clear. In the British citizenship test, for example, the questions which people have to ask are frankly ridiculous. Whether you know what date St. David's Day is not a British value. It tells you nothing whether you know it or not. Most British people don't know it or not. So it's utterly irrelevant. And being asked questions like, what should you do if you spill someone's pint in a pub? I.e., the correct answer being buy them a new pint. That's just basic manners. Again, you're really giving such a superficial set of questions because you're too cowardly to stand up for your own values, and therefore, by doing so, say which values are not tolerable.
Somebody is criticizing me saying that there are World War II veterans still alive. As far as I'm concerned, they are, even though they are like super old, but they are still, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, yeah, it's yeah. I mean, obviously
numbers, yeah.
diminishing numbers substantially, and obviously they'd have to have been fairly young at the time, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so again, when it comes to sort of people becoming like this person, again, it stands to us not standing up for Western values. The fact is that the Western countries are great, and we should not be afraid for saying so. And it's not because we're white, it's not because whatever, it's because the values that the Western society is built upon are the ones of the Enlightenment, of the individual rights, of the philosophy that defends or makes sure or enables the best within people, enables human flourishment to the best of their own individual capability. And that is nothing to be ashamed for, that should be fought for. That's why people immigrate to Western countries, is exactly that, because they know that's the best place for their for whatever they want to achieve. Unfortunately, even if they want to achieve Islamism, the Western countries are tolerant and open to that, which they shouldn't be. Marco, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Well, there's not much more I can add to what you just said. It's just that Ayn Rand has been speaking about this kind of stuff throughout her life, making the point that individual right is the main way to achieve happiness and equal society, really. Because if everybody's right is respected, nobody has got any reason to try and overtake somebody else. But we're not there. People do not accept rationality, do not accept reality, and there we are. That's the kind of society we seem to prefer for some reason.
And in terms of looking for some of the work we've done in the past, do check out the Briefly Objective. The link's in the description below for short form material taken from many of the discussions on these kind of topics, including the Campus Intifada for one, which is all in the on that channel. So do check it out.
And with that, we have the James Valiant's a principled analysis of the US Constitution course coming up at the top of the hour. That's for YouTube Inner Circle members, so you can become one right now to get an access. You'll also get access to all the recordings from the Irreplaceable Spark Conference 1. If you want to check out Irreplaceable Spark Conference 2, check out objectivism.co.uk to find out more about it. And also Ayn Rand Center UK, AynRandCenter.co.uk/newsletter to sign up for our mailing list, rather, I should say, where we send up anything that is happening. And also the US Constitution course is available to Read and Metal and above, meaning minus Mulligan memberships. So you should have received your email if you are one, and you can still become one. With that, thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you for everybody for watching. And if you are not a member, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective and the reality show. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.